Good morning, or good afternoon, actually. David, nice to meet you and see you again. We
Good
have
to
the
see you,
pleasure
Michelle.
of introducing and welcoming Forrest Outman to our podcast today, who is a dance historian. Hello, Forrest.
Hello.
We've been talking about having you on the podcast for a little while. We're very excited to have you here. Forrest, I think it might be very interesting to have you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the history of dance. Where did your interest come from?
Okay, well, I suppose the faster version of it is to say that I started when I was first started teaching around 1998, when I started teaching professionally. And I was at the time, that was when the swing revival had started. And before that, my background was in international 10 dance. So
Okay.
I did that style. And then I went out, and I think I just started doing American style a year prior or so. And then I went out to the clubs, the nightclubs, going dancing, and they were doing everything but what I knew, which was basically jive and a little bit of American style, East Coast swing. And I was like, what's this, So that started making me, question what I knew and what they were doing, right? I later found out they were doing variants of bop and Lindy Hop. Yeah. So anyway, I started trying to figure that out. So I started digging into what is swing and studying that and realized, oh my gosh, there's a bunch of them. And then whenever my students had questions, I like to have answers. I don't like to just, I don't know. I'll look into that, I'll find out. So I started studying, and I ran across an old dance manual in the back of the studio one day that was from the 70s. And I cracked it up and started reading it. And it had all these things I'd never heard of before, like the Latin hustle. And the steps that they were going through, so I was pretty good at reading manuals. I'd break it down, and I was like, what's this step in cha-cha called the chicken scratch? And I thought it was really cool, and I brought it to the studio owner, and he's like, oh, that old thing. It's like, nobody does that stuff anymore, Forrest. Do that in your own time. So I did. And that's what got me started in studying dancing, first as just a personal edification, and so that I didn't feel ignorant. And then later on when I went to college, that was when it became a bit more academic, when, my professors told me, you've got a knack for this, you should do this. The story there, real quick, was I had a term paper that was a writing assignment, this research project. They said, ask a question that you've always wanted the answer to, because you're more likely to dig a little deeper. And I said, well, what's the origin of Foxtrot? Because this whole story about Harry Fox making it up didn't make any sense to me, because he's very famous. Why didn't he ever say I invented the Foxtrot? That'd be very easy for him to put in press. He never claimed it. So I figured, I'll try to dig into that one. End of the semester comes up, they ask me to turn in my sources, and I say, I can't do it. She's like, what? She's like, all you had to do is print out 8 sources. I said, I can't print it out. She said, why? I said, because I got 2,500 sources or so. And she said, you have 2,500 sources for a term paper? And I said, yeah. So I showed her my laptop, and that's how I started getting into the academic side of maybe I should do more than just do this for fun. She's like, yeah, that's a way, way, way more than normal. So
Slight obsession.
Yeah, you went deep on that. That's great.
That's my story on how I got into it, and never stopped.
Have you been continually surprised? And I'm sure that there's certain stories that you could probably share in the history of certain dances that kind of made you go, wow, that was different than you anticipated. Is there any that are really outstanding that make you kind of go,
Oh yeah, most of them are fairly complex. When you dig deep, you start to find like there's all these twists and turns in how things get to be where they are. It's not simple. It's phases of evolution and things happen.
Absolutely.
So an example would be the Foxtrot I just mentioned. The Foxtrot was not really what we think of the Foxtrot today. You got to understand it's a different dance now than it was then. It's over 100 years old now. But the story about Harry Fox is being the origin of it is kind of ish true. But he was actually dancing with, at the time, he had married a very famous twin sister duo known as the Dolly Sisters, who were the it girls, if you will, of the ragtime era. Quite the fashion plates. Anyway, so his wife at the time had just come back from like having a surgery, what have you, decided to make some money by dancing with her sister, whom she became famous with, and they did a show with a guy named Carlos Sebastian, who was another very famous vaudeville dancer. And they based their routine, in one of their routines, I should say, off of material that was being done by another couple at the time at the same theater. That had invented a dance in 1913 known as the pony trot, which was a partnered version of a dance that was done prior to that as a pony ballet. That's what it was known as, which is basically all of the ladies kind of dressed up in horse costumes and carted around a cart, really, in precision dancing. So think of like the Rockettes or Showgirls in Vegas, where you have what they call precision dance numbers, right? Formations, where everybody does everything synchronized. This concept was invented by an Englishman known as Tiller. And the Tiller girls were the first ones that did that. And Ziegfeld brought him over to train his dancers. So that's where we really get that style from. And the Dolly Sisters were originally part of Ziegfeld Follies and did pony ballet numbers with Ziegfeld Follies. So they're familiar with the pony ballet, so they adopted that when they saw this other pony trot routine being done. Anyway, so they stole it from them, and then Harry stole it from his wife. I'm sure she taught him. But he did it more as a comedic number, because at the time he was performing, since he wasn't performing with his wife, he was a comedic dancer, meaning it was always, tongue-in-cheek. He was really more of a comedian. He did song and dance and comedic stuff. So I found out later, because there's an article that was found that has him dancing with his 6 American Beauties, right? And I later found a picture of the 6 American Beauties, and they were all washmates. They weren't beauties at all. It was a joke. So it was, but anyway, so basically they were doing their pony ballet number, and then they broke off and did pony trot with him. And later on, as a promotion, they would have, at the time, that they had rooftop ballrooms. Yes, so this is a big thing in New York at the time, because basically Ziegfeld and other promoters realized that after the shows that ended, everyone was still going out and having drinks and dancing. So let's keep the money in house.
Right.
So then they put on rooftop performances and such after hours, if you will, after hours dance till wee hours in the morning. They partied all night, and no joke. So yeah, this Ziegfeld's Midnight Frolics started in 1913, I believe, which were done on the rooftop of the New Amsterdam Theater, which still exists now. Disney owns it. It's beautiful. They restored it, though the rooftop ballroom has not been made public. Waiting for that one. And Disney, get on it. Then so anyway, they had at the time learned the dances that were being done in the show was one of the things they were promoting, and they brought in another dance instructor to do it, and kind of teach the layman, if you will, a simplified version, if you will. But the pony trot is a syncopated one step, meaning twice as fast as a one step. And one step is a fairly brisk dance. So you're doing and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. And if you imagine that, and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2, you can see how it'd be a pony trot. Yes, right. Prancing step, right? But the problem is it's exhausting. So the instructor who was hired, Oscar Durier, who is a well-known New York dance master, after dancing 6 or so times, said, I don't care if they cut my pay in half, I'm going to cut the time in half. So he started dancing half-time steps mixed in with it. And that's really what caught on, was he started teaching this, because if he couldn't do it, he figured none of these people can really do this either. Yeah.
And that's where the walks came in, right?
And that's where the walking steps came in, really. So he's, if you will, the person that brought that in, and then integrated steps from the two-step into it, which is not the country and western two-step or nightclub two-step that we'd think of today. The two-step back then would be like a step together step. Yes, usually done diagonally. So I'd go left together, left, and right together, right, and it could be done progressively or what have you, in boxes, yada yada.
Right.
That's the origin of the Foxtrot. It's a little bit more twisted because, you know, there's all these other things that go into the story to really make sense of why he didn't claim it, because he didn't invent it. He stole it, and the version that caught on, he really didn't create either. It was just given his namesake because it was popularized because of his show.
Right. So because of his popularity, all of a sudden the history of it, which is what the majority of us know as Foxtrot, has history of Harry Fox and that sort of thing. But there's much deeper. Oh,
it's on my coffee table right next to me.
There you go.
Harry
Foxtrot in 1918.
So for those who are on audio, Forrest has this great
music.
cover we'll put in the show notes.
That's Harry
Is
Fox.
that an album cover?
Oh, this is sheet music.
Sheet music.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
With the foxes drawn on
Yes,
it.
the
That's interesting.
foxes trotting around, yes.
Yes. So one of the things I was hoping we could talk to you about today, Forrest, I had seen you had written in the past about the dance party and how the concept of a dance party at one time was quite different than many of us think about it today. I'm a little bit of a classic movie fan. I have seen the thing where the ladies with their dance cards and whatnot, and I always kind of wondered what that was about. But I'm wondering if you could talk to us about the history of the social dance party and what typically happened there.
Going mobile here. I happen to have a whole bunch of dance cards sitting on my table right here. I'll grab two of them. Here.
Nice.
Got stuff sitting all over my house. Here we go. So
this is related to the article too, right? That you had written in American Dancer, the magazine?
Yeah, so I assume that's what you're referencing. Yes, the article for American Dancer. So yeah, dance cards, you'd find all kinds of them. Say, this would be like a Halloween dance. It's a little dance card here where you can see it's a ghost on the front of it. Ooh. So it's shaped like a ghost, and you flip it open, and then boo, right? Then it would have inside your dance card, you'd have, you know, the spook dance of Acacia, 1946, right? And then so you give like the chaperones who they are and such, and then you'd usually have inside like a little place where it might have the names of the dances that are being done, who's performing, memories, things like that, right? We can write little things about what's happened and such, and you know, they're usually themed. So this is a spring fever on this one, all right? Or here we have a mood indigo.
Nice.
But yeah, so they were literally for the purpose of scheduling your dances for the evening.
And how would that actually work logistically? How did people go about the scheduling?
Okay, so the way that dances worked then would be you had a set amount of dances already scheduled for the evening and how long they would be and such. So they knew, let's say they would have 10 or 20 different dances that night, right? And they would already have them planned out what dances they were going to be, what the bands were going to play, because again, music was live bands then. So the bands had to know what they were playing. Yeah, so they had to, oh, if you need a tango, we have to learn a tango.
Right.
So that would be how they planned it in advance, because depending upon the dance band, you'd have to hire the correct dance band for what you wanted.
Right, if it was a themed night. Would the dance cards be specific with whom they were dancing with?
That's what you filled in a dance card.
Okay.
So a dance card is blank.
Okay.
I think I held up a blank one a minute ago. Yes, here's one. See, this one you can see has not filled in. So it's a blank one. It had 12 dances that night. So you'd have 12 different dances, and say, if you knew the program, you'd go, oh, okay, so the third one is a waltz, and you know, Johnny's the best waltzer in the play, so I dance with him, or what have you, right? So you'd have their friends and such, or maybe their significant other, would fill out the dances they wanted to, and then they would fill in the other ones with other people.
If I wanted to add someone's to my dance card, would I write them in myself, or would I have to approach that person and ask if they'd be willing to be added to my dance card? How did that work?
Absolutely, you had to ask someone to dance, yes. So you would ask them, may I have a foxtrot this evening or whatever, or, let's say a swing number, jitterbug, what have you. Whatever dance they wanted, they would just go and ask the person for that. And say, Susie, could I have a mambo with you, right? So then you fill that in on your card, and that'd be scheduled. Okay, dance number 11. I'm dancing with Johnny or Cindy or whatever, right?
So it's all preset then, eh? Forrest, I'm understanding that the dance card is given and you organize who you wish to dance with and you assign that to your card.
Right, that's
prior
part
to
of
the dances, yeah.
That's part of the evening. So dance cards have a little bracelet on them. They always have a loop on them. So the ladies would dance around with their dance card, if you will, right? And they would carry little pens on them. I don't know if you've ever seen these before, but it's quite often that people had even like brooch pencils and things that they could easily pull out and write on. Yes.
Oh, that's lovely. That's nice to know.
I'm assuming then the evening would start with maybe like a cocktail hour or some just kind of general mingling where that scheduling would happen before the actual dancing commenced. Is that the idea?
So if we're looking at something that's planned out, like a ball or a dance party, that's different than what people know today. What a lot of people today experience is more like what a business would be, which would be known as a dance hall. And a dance hall is a place where you just pay to get in and has live music and you come and go as you please. And it's just, they provide a facility, and some of them of course had dinner and dancing and a bar or what have you, but it was basically a place you just went into. It would be the nightclub of its era, essentially.
Right.
But that's different than a planned party that you're invited to, or a ball which may or may not be open to the public, that you buy tickets to in advance and such, and has seating and things like that, scheduled in advance, more like you'd see at a wedding or something, right? You're at table numbers such and such. So
got you.
that would be more what a ball would be generally, and also what a dance party would be.
Interesting.
So yes, they did have festivities planned throughout the evening that were not just dancing. That would be a big difference between a dance hall, which was just basically a facility that had entertainment. You also had places like, say, the Cotton Club, famous place in New York City, that was really more of a place for entertainment than social dancing. They might have opened the floor up for dancing here and there, but mostly it was a place for performers. You'd sit and watch and have drinks and such. So that was stage dancing primarily versus social dancing. And there's a lot of distinctions there historically that people don't understand today as much.
So there was also some reference in that article about games that were often part of these events. I would love to hear a little bit more about your knowledge on that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's a big part of it. So you were saying, what did they start with? They always started with dance known as the Grand March. Okay, the Grand March in a ball would be, it's basically literally a march. They, like, when we think of turn of the century, Salsa's marches were the most popular thing, over there, songs like that, which were very patriotic, yeah. So marches, though, a march would be played, and then everyone would basically form like a line. And they'd be marching in a line around the room usually, yes, to get everyone started, if you will. And then that line, you would have a dance master, if you will, a person who's in charge of the dancing and organizing that. And usually you'd have a few ringers, people that were selected beforehand that were familiar with figures and things, kind of lead up the front. And you might even have another person or two around the room to help organize, make sure everybody goes where they're supposed to go. But the Grand March, basically, you would go up around and circle, and then you'd go down in a line, you and your partner.
Okay.
Then the next person, they would break off, say to the left, and the next person would come off and break off to the right. Then you'd circle back around. Yes. Then it would come up and two couples now would go down. So now you've got 4, and they would break off in one direction. Then the 4 next would come up and break off in the other direction. Yes, like a waterfall mixer, if you are familiar with that idea. Then they come around, and now you have 8 coming up, and they break off and break off. Then it could come back down to the center, and then you'd have like a whole wall. And then from that, you could like break off into a line, and then everyone would form into a line now. And then you could do like figure 8 figures and things, the whole line, or do a serpentine where you'd circle around. Yes, like this. Do things like London bridges, all these other types of variations where nowadays when people might think of a conga.
Right.
Conga line. Yeah. But that would be an example of something that anyone could do without any dance training, get out on the dance floor. The purpose of that was that
parade of marching.
Everybody up having fun, no skill required. So everybody's involved. Say if you come out with your husband and he doesn't like dance, he doesn't know how to dance, so he wants to sit out. Well, he can do that one. He can get out and mix it up with everyone. That'd be the point of that.
Okay, and so the games that would then follow at the end of the evening, and they would be different?
Right. Well, traditionally you have a good night waltz. That'd be a pretty common thing. But yes, there would usually be another mixer as well. I would say that it'd be pretty common to have at least 3 mixers, 3 types of these in a dance, sometimes 4. And again, it would be, you'd have, say, 4 or 5 songs, then you'd have another one of these that were games or such that were made to get people involved again. And the whole idea there then that no one sits for too long.
Right.
And that's a big difference, I would say, is the thought that went behind inclusion then versus today. It's more like, oh, learn the dance and then you can do the dance, rather than let's find ways that we can make people get on the dance floor even if they're not that competent of a dancer.
Yes, and it makes social events so much more enjoyable when there is that level of incorporation to make sure everybody's up and dancing. Just because I own my own studio, it's a huge part of our social dances to make sure that we do that. Actually, I've done dance cards before in a fun way. And I try to just do different things to bring that back so that there's always that incorporation, where we'll do the mixers, or we'll do something where we'll get people up and they have to change partners, or something very generic that lets everybody dance at the same time. And it really does just get everybody out of their chairs so there isn't that divide, which is a really important thing to do on a social side. And now you talked about all of those things. Now, is it just an evolutionary phase where they all just kind of washed out and none of that happens anymore?
Yes and no. The dancing getting less and less formal over the years, the frequency of balls, them not being part of social events anymore, used to be something that was quite common publicly, to even have annual balls in the city and things like that were big to-dos. The size of the population growing and cities getting bigger and bigger and things, I think, changed the dynamics a little bit over the years. Also, the dance culture in itself, and culture in itself evolving and changing slightly, you know, like say the 60s when call dancing became popular, like the pony, the swim, the watusi, you know, these were, you're dancing in front of your partner, not with your partner. So there was this period of time when people weren't really touch dancing anymore as much, and that changed the dynamics for that generation, if you will, or two. And then, you know, when you get back to, say, the big boom of the hustle in the 70s, bringing back touch dancing, and from there it kind of stayed around. But now we have, you know, hip hop dancing and such coming out, and, you know, go-go dancing and all these other solo styles as well. So they're coexisting now on the dance floor. And then you had these other people now breaking off into subcultures, whereas before there wasn't subcultures so much. there may have been ethnic subcultures, but they were still partner dancing. So instead of having fractions, all these different splinters within subcultures, you know, now have different venues where everyone's divided. And that's definitely changed things now.
As far as I'm familiar with the concept of the mixer as I've experienced it, where it's typically gentlemen or leaders lining up on one side of the hall, followers on the other side, and you all basically queue towards the front, and whoever's at the front of the two lines will partner and dance once, maybe down the length of the hall, and then rejoin their queue at the end. Were the mixers back in the day very similar to that, or did they have different styles of mixers?
They had tons and tons of mixers.
Okay.
Way more creative than today. I mean, geez. I mean, there's entire books written on the topic. You can look at like novelty dances, say, that were made specifically for the purpose of mixing. You had things that are known as like the cotillions or Germans that were more dance games than they were necessarily get in a line and now we do a waltz. Dance games instead. And they had just a massive variety of them out there. Again, books full of them. So today you just don't see that. And I don't know how exactly that faded away to the state it's in today, but I think that that's something we could definitely learn from the past, because they socialized quite a bit since they didn't have TVs. And, their form of entertainment was to go out.
Do you have a favorite historic mixer that?
There's different ones I like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's one that popped in my mind as soon as you said it was one that they would do is have, like, they would say cut the lights, and then they would hand out flashlights, or they'd dim the lights and then hand out flashlights, and then to say a few leads around the room, and then that lead would then go and shine a light on someone, and then cut in on that person. And so they'd have spotlight dance, if you will, boom, and then that person then would take the flashlight, and then they have to go and shine in the light on somebody else, and so you'd have a few flashlights shining around through the dark on different people as they're dancing around the ballroom.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Just a fun little thing. Or they would do a similar thing with, common thing would be to do that, say, with a top hat or something, and they'd give them a top hat, and they'd be with the top hat, and then they'd have to go put the hat on someone else, and then they would take their partner and go off.
But you're right. I mean, what you're doing in all of these things is just trying to infuse the social side of dance. And that is absolutely not nearly as present at all compared to all these great stories, right? Yes,
definitely. And then they had prizes. Another thing, they used to do dance games, like I said, that had prizes. That was another very common thing. You have prizes throughout the evening. And a lot of those had nothing to do with skill. Today we think about competitive dancing so much, and then they thought more about fun, rewarding fun, just for the sake of fun. So it'd be something like if you were dancing around the room, and they would have, say, put like a symbols on the floor, and if you're standing on the circle right now, you win. Whoever's closest to the circle.
Beautiful
right?
Ambiguity. Just you win because you're there. Yeah.
Yeah. So the MC would be on the microphone, and whoever's standing next to the triangle now, they cut the music or have the band pause. And like, okay, you win. Yes, and they could have like a song like that where they would just, or maybe randomly throughout the evening, have things like that happening. Again, just to make it so that people are having fun. Like, oh my gosh, I won something. I didn't even have any idea.
I like that idea. So some socials I go to, I think it's a fairly common pattern today where they hand out tickets and they just do a drawing. And if you have the right ticket number, you win a prize. But what I like about this one is you have to be on the floor. You have to be on the floor participating to be in on the action in a sense, right? And it is a little bit more fun than just looking at numbers.
Yeah, and the ticket number thing too can be a bit of a drag too, just because the raffle kind of feel about it, in my opinion. It doesn't feel spontaneous or fun or creative. Whereas they used to do all types of different things. An example would be you had favors that would be at a dance party or a ball. Those would be handed out, say, at the beginning of an evening. So an example would be maybe you might get a pin for your lapel. So the leads gentleman would get, say, a lapel pin. And maybe it would be themed. Like one that I liked is the idea of having, aces and spades and hearts and clubs and such. And leaders would be given those, like little pins that they put on. And then the followers, say, would have their dance cards, and inside them, it would have like a symbol maybe on the inside of it. I've actually got one, believe it or not, here that is a house, is cards, if you will. And
Okay.
so those might be cut in different suits and things, and that would be integrated into games. So, you'd have to find your match, and that's how you'd have a mixer.
Oh, that's
They'd
fun.
have these little ingenious ways that they incorporated things in the room and on people's persons and such to encourage mixing.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think there's so much we could learn from all these clever ideas and techniques that were once used. I'd like to see some of that come back. I was intrigued, Michelle, when you said that you use the dance cards at an event. I've never experienced dance cards in real, and I wish I could have been there for that. That sounds.
I know, and I'll do it again. I certainly didn't do them to the same length as Forrest just explained, but I have done them multiple times. I've done them really blank, where literally I just will arbitrarily give numbers to the gentleman on one side and then matching numbers to the ladies on the other side. So the same lineup like you talked about going in the queue, but instead of just meeting who's at the end of the queue, you have to find the matching number. So I would do things like that. And I deliberately, just because it's a private studio, would give the numbers to other people so they're not dancing with their respective partner, just to create the mix. So that's just me making sure that everybody is doing that. And the buzz it creates is just lovely, because it's one thing to set it up and have that and then watch them dance, because of course you pick a platform that makes it quite comfortable, which I'm sure was part of the sequence as well, right, for us, making sure that it was a mix of a dance maybe in those days that was conducive for everyone. So, but then the social side of it after the dance was just the buzz of everybody talking and just the joy of doing that. And then reminding them about that, gracious etiquette, thank your partner for your dance and get them to escort them back to their table. Little things that will never die. They're wonderful parts of our dance world in history, and I try in little snippets to bring them back.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's really well done.
Thank you.
I'm glad to hear people doing stuff like that. I want to go out and run my own dance event now somewhere and try to employ some of these techniques that, Forrest, you were describing. I hope some of the folks in our audience who run their own dance events are inspired to maybe try some of these as well. That would be really cool.
Oh, that reminded me real quick that.
Yeah.
So the idea you had, that's called a lucky numbers dance.
Oh, there we go.
So here it is from one of my books on successful dance parties from, I think, 1940. But yeah, the idea of having, like, if you will, bingo. There would be another thing. They'd play like bingo for partners.
Oh, that's
now, do you go anywhere socially dancing at this point in your life and career of dance?
Oh yeah, I still socially dance quite often, yeah.
Okay, and do you encounter anything presently of any of the awesome history that you know?
No, unfortunately, no. I wish I did.
I know. So are you teaching as well? Is that part of your world right now?
Yes, I still teach, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I just didn't know what your current situation was. You're obviously very dedicated to the history of it, and all of your information is fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing it with us.
No problem. My pleasure.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. So, Forrest, how can people best reach you?
An easy way to reach me would be to get a hold of me via my website, dancehistorian.com, or you could find me on Facebook, Forrest Outman, FORRESTOUTMAN, and just look me up there and send me a message if you have any information that you want from me specifically, or maybe something we touched on. Feel free to hit me up, and I'll send you some more info on it.
Perfect.
That's great. How appropriate. Dancehistorian.com. Love it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Forrest. All the best.
All right. Thank you, Michelle. My pleasure.